MP, have any of them deemed to be close contacts with you? Have you been in close contact or meeting with them at any point recently?
We've been working very, very closely on all the details of the current situation with experts from public health, with the top public health officials, both in Ottawa and across the river in Gatineau. So far, the recommendation is that I self-monitor, that I do rapid tests, that I do testing regularly. So far, it's all been negative. You will know if ever it becomes positive. I promise you that. And also to try and reduce my contacts as much as possible. But it is not the recommendation from public health at this time, given the nature of the contacts with my staff, that I go into full isolation. But of course, we're going to continue to monitor and follow those public health guidelines to the letter.
Thank you. Merci. La prochaine question, Julie-Anne Lapointe, Radio-Canada.
Question from Julie-Anne Lapointe from Radio-Canada.
Bonjour, M. Trudeau. Pourquoi ne pas fermer carrément les frontières étant donné les inquiétudes à l'heure actuelle? Est-ce que ça demeure aussi une option qui est toujours envisagée?
Is that still an option on the table?
On est toujours ouvert à n'importe quelle option qui va garder les Canadiens plus en sécurité. On a démontré ça. Mais la réalité, c'est que Omicron est présent. Omicron est là dans nos communautés à travers le pays et de fermer les frontières maintenant ne serait pas une mesure efficace. Comme on a vu pendant les vagues précédentes, les arrivées à la frontière représentent une infime partie de la transmission de COVID, de se concentrer sur l'interdiction et de communication ou qu'on répande la COVID le plus possible pendant le temps des fêtes dans les communautés. C'est là où on veut plus mettre nos ressources. Et c'est à ce niveau-là qu'on est en train de faire tout le travail nécessaire. Mais comme j'ai dit, on va suivre la recommandation des sciences de la santé publique par rapport à ça. Mais de fermer les frontières à ce moment-ci, ça n'ajouterait pas grand-chose pour beaucoup de perturbations parce qu'il faut toujours souligner qu'un citoyen canadien ou un résident permanent peut en tout temps revenir au Canada. On ne peut pas fermer les frontières
has the right to return home at any time. We cannot close the border to Canadians. They always are allowed to come home.
De communication dans nos communautés. Mais
so we are
je suis content de passer la parole au ministre de la Santé pour en
Now I
dire
can
plus.
also hand it over to the Minister of Health.
Oui, merci, Monsieur le Premier ministre.
Yes, thank you, Prime Minister.
J'ajouterais qu'au Canada, par rapport à tous les pays comparables dans le monde, nous avons toujours eu durant la COVID-19 et nous avons encore les mesures frontalières les plus strictes et les plus efficaces.
We have, compared to other countries, some of the strongest border measures of any country.
La couche de test avant l'arrivée
I would like to stress an important layer of protection, which is testing before coming into the country, which is required. And that was a layer of protection that we quickly implemented. And we also put in place another measure, which is testing upon arrival. So we are using a multi-layered approach. And I also support what the Prime Minister said, that is that community spread now even more than for prior variants, including Delta, is what we're focusing on, and that is in part because of the very transmissible nature of the Omicron variant. That is why we are focusing on short-term contacts.
Et question de suivi, toujours pour M. Trudeau.
Follow-up
Vous
question,
avez eu
so for
vous-même
Mr.
des discussions
Trudeau.
sur vos plans pour le temps des fêtes.
You
C'est un
had
peu
to
le jour
change
de la
your
marmotte,
holiday
sauf que là, on
plans.
est déjà vacciné.
It's like Groundhog Day, except this time we're vaccinated.
Est-ce que vous avez dit vous-même à
It
vos
doesn't seem like
proches,
there's a
qu'est-ce que vous
miracle
diriez aux Canadiens
solution?
qui sont
What would you say to
découragés
Canadians
parce que
who are
nous
feeling
attendent pour les prochains mois?
discouraged when they look to the coming months?
You might be on mute.
You might be on mute.
Excusez-moi, je reprends. Je comprends à quel point les gens peuvent être épuisés et tannés par rapport à la COVID-19. Je comprends, il n'y a pas personne qui voulait être dans cette situation-ci.
I know that no one wanted to end up in
this
situation.
Sont encore plus épuisés.
But I would like for people to keep in mind that our healthcare workers are even more exhausted by the pandemic. For them, they have been working extremely hard for 2 years since the beginning of the pandemic. And I know it is difficult for all families, not just my own, to decrease gathering sizes and to only see very close family members. But we need to be careful during this holiday season. We must continue to do the right thing, to do things right, and to do what we know how to do. We know how to reduce our contacts. We must continue to be vaccinated, to get our booster doses, to wear our masks, hand hygiene, etc. These are all things that we have known how to do and will help us get through this.
Thank you. Merci. The next question is from Jordan Press from the Canadian Press. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good afternoon. Prime Minister, just a moment ago you said that we were prepared for the potential for this to happen when you talked about the benefits. And yet it seems that in many parts of the country, despite warnings that Omicron was coming, it seems that there's been, from what many people would believe, is a failure of the system when you think of, for instance, testing capacity, as one of my colleagues asked about. So I'm wondering, given your comments, if you believe that it is really the provincial and territorial governments that have dropped the ball on this. And if not, how much responsibility does the federal government then shoulder for the failure that we are seeing now of the system that seems to have been unprepared for Omicron despite the warnings?
No, that's a very good question, Jordan. The reality is we have all been working flat out and learning much about COVID over the past 2 years, and indeed bracing for Omicron. When Omicron started to hit, we took immediate measures at the border to try and slow the arrival of Omicron, which I think probably bought us a little bit of time. But even before Omicron's arrival, we were there on stepping up to order enough boosters into 2022 for all Canadians, which is why people can be comfortable going to get that booster shot that does provide protection against Omicron as quickly as possible so that we can stay safe. We have continued to order rapid tests. We ramped up our ordering of rapid tests actually in the fall of 2020. And over the past year, we have delivered close to 100 million rapid tests to the provinces. We're continuing to order even more. There will be more. Questions around distribution, questions around speed and ease of access are more properly given to the provinces, but we will be there to support. Like I've said, the example of Nova Scotia as a place that has adopted early and rapid use of rapid testing, it was just something that they were ready for, and therefore have seen positive results from. But Omicron is here, and we're just going to have to hunker down and be careful. The measures that we put in place to support businesses, like I said, we saw that as a need for local lockdown potential through the winter. But because we put those measures in place, we are able to adjust them so that they are broader based and able to affect more people given the scale of this Omicron wave.
And as my follow-up, I'd like to ask you about President Biden's speech yesterday, because he obviously, the messages that American presidents deliver have long been heard in Canadian living rooms and homes, despite the fact they don't govern Canadians. And yet I'm wondering what you make of what he said, of what President Biden said yesterday as far as the holiday season, and how much do you think that will resonate with Canadians and some of the decisions that they may make given the message you're delivering today? Canadians
are among the most vaccinated people in the world. Americans have a much lower double vaccination rate, which is certainly something that the president no doubt had on his mind as he was, touting the benefits of being vaccinated. But we know, and I'll turn to Dr. Tam right after this, we know that Omicron can break through double vaccination, which is why it is so important to get that third booster shot. It spreads much more quickly, it is more contagious, but vaccination will prevent people to a large extent from getting into the ICU, from getting the severe outcomes. So vaccination is still a really, really important part of our pillars of defense against COVID, against Omicron, but it's not the only thing. What we need to do on top of being so well vaccinated as we are is get those booster shots and make efforts to reduce our contacts during the holiday season, reduce the spread of Omicron so we prevent our healthcare systems from getting overwhelmed. Even if, as it's starting to show, perhaps a lower percentage of people who get Omicron get into critical care, if the numbers skyrocket, that'll still be enough to overwhelm those healthcare workers who've been working so hard. So we need to know that getting vaccinated, getting your boosters, and being safe in the choices we make as we gather is how we get through this. The good news is Canadians have done it before. We've done it through the difficult waves. We know what to do. We know it gets better afterwards. We're just going to have to hunker down for the coming weeks as it'll prove to be a difficult winter. But I'll turn to Teresa right now to add or complete anything that I just said.
Well, that was a very comprehensive answer from the Prime Minister. I think we need to focus on how to manage this particular wave and this variant by focusing on reducing impacts on the health system and reducing the severe outcomes. I know that it's very difficult with a very rapidly escalating transmission going on with Omicron, that we can't prevent every case. We can't actually detect every case necessarily because of the sheer numbers from the provinces and territories. So the key thing is please focus on preventing any further impacts on the highest risk, the long-term care, the hospitals, making sure our healthcare workers are protected and any high-risk populations, and line up in a orderly manner, if you like, to get the boosters, because we want the highest risk to get protected first. That is the prime objective, and that can be done very easily. The doses are there. I think one particular point I want to make is that it's not just about numbers of vaccines or tests. We have a finite human health resource capacity. And so this is why we're doing what we're all doing now, so that people can get their boosters in a very organized manner, as well as making sure the tests are there for the high-risk population.
So I'm told we are over time with the Prime Minister, but maybe we have time for one more, if that's okay, operator, for the PM.
Thank you. La prochaine question va être alors de Olivier Ferron-Boisé, TVA Nouvelle. À vous la parole.
Over to you.
Oui, bonjour. Merci, M. Trudeau, de prendre une autre question. Je veux vous parler de la demande de Québec pour les forces armées canadiennes, mais cette fois, c'est pour aider à la vaccination. Quel type de ressources on a au sein des forces? Quelle ampleur en termes de nombre pourrait être déployée? Et quand on pourra avoir un déploiement des membres, mais aussi de d'autres ressources fédérales, parce que dans la demande de Mme Guilbeault, on parle aussi de ressources d'autres organisations fédérales. Est-ce qu'il y en a ailleurs dans l'appareil fédéral qui peuvent insérer des
agency or body in the federal,
non, merci Olivier pour la question. C'est sûr que comme on l'a fait depuis le début, on va être là pour aider les provinces et territoires qui font face à des situations difficiles. Que ce soit avec la Croix-Rouge, que ce soit avec les forces armées canadiennes, on est justement en train de coordonner le plus possible pour être là pour aider les provinces en difficulté. La réalité, différemment des vagues précédentes, c'est que Omicron est en train de frapper partout
previous waves
en même
is that
temps.
Omicron
Et on
is
n'a pas des
hitting
ressources
everywhere
infinies, donc il
all
va
at
falloir
once.
qu'on fasse des choix pour
So we will
mieux aider. À ce niveau-là,
make
on est en
choices
conversation
to
avec,
best be of
avec Québec
assistance.
et avec d'autres provinces
We
pour
are in
vraiment
communication
regarder
with Quebec and other provinces.
de quelle façon on peut
We are
aider
looking at
avec le plus
how we can
d'impact,
best help
sachant que nos
and
ressources à
have
travers
the
le pays
most impact, knowing
sont
that
limitées.
our resources
Mais
across the
peut-être
country are
Jean-Yves,
limited.
tu es en train de regarder ça attentivement aussi.
Jean-Yves is looking at this
Tout à fait.
closely
Alors,
as well.
effectivement, les ressources du gouvernement canadien sont évidemment limitées. Le gouvernement canadien a
it is
aussi
true
des
that Canadian
responsabilités envers
resources
les
are
peuples
limited.
autochtones et envers des communautés éloignées et certains territoires en particulier.
We have been in
Troisièmement, les
communication
provinces
with
sont
northern
toutes, comme le
and
disait le
remote
Premier ministre, dans
communities.
une situation ou bien
As the Prime Minister
identique
said,
ou bien de plus en
all
plus
provinces in
semblable.
this wave
Elles
are
ont
in
toutes,
more or less a
évidemment,
similar situation at the
besoin
same
d'aide et on
time.
est ouvert, on travaille très
And
bien
all need
avec elles.
help. We are open and we are
en
working
contact hier
with
encore
all jurisdictions.
ensemble. J'ai parlé au ministre
For example, yesterday I
hier
spoke
pour être
to
sûr de bien comprendre
a
les
premier
besoins parce que la quatrième chose, c'est
so that I
effectivement ça.
could know
C'est qu'on est en
the
conversation avec eux
specific
pour bien
needs
saisir les besoins auxquels on pourrait rapidement,
of that particular
rapidement
region
et efficacement
so that we
répondre
can respond
en
rapidly
collaboration
and
et en appui avec
effectively in cooperation with the other regions.
Merci.
Thank you.
En suivi, si jamais vous avez une approximation du nombre qui pourrait être déployé et ou des dates auxquelles ça pourrait être apprécié, mais sinon, pour mon suivi, les États-Unis qui ont approuvé aujourd'hui le traitement antiviral de Pfizer qui permettrait de réduire les hospitalisations. Bon, le processus est toujours en cours à Santé Canada. On a des ententes pour en avoir jusqu'à 2 millions. Est-ce que c'est réaliste de penser qu'on pourrait s'en servir dans cette vague-ci comme un outil pour réduire les hospitalisations qui sont vraiment au nerf de la guerre, qui sont la cause des mesures
we will be able to reduce hospitalization of rates in Quebec
Je viens d'avoir un briefing là-dessus. Je peux vous assurer que Santé Canada est en train de travailler extrêmement fort pour faire l'évaluation nécessaire pour pouvoir approuver les choses le plus rapidement possible. Mais encore une fois, je suis content de tourner la parole vers le ministre Duclos, le ministre de la Santé.
Donc, deux bonnes nouvelles, c'est que Santé Canada fait ce travail présentement en collaboration avec
Health Canada is working in cooperation with departments from other countries who are doing exactly the same.
Qui ont été signés il y a quelques semaines, 1 million de traitements de Pfizer, 500 000 pour Merck. Ça, ce sont des traitements, donc ce sont le nombre de gens qui pourraient être profités de ces traitements. Chaque traitement, c'est 10 doses, 2 doses par jour durant 5 jours. Donc, ça va bien à la fois sur le plan réglementaire et sur le plan de la réglementation.
These are still being assessed.
Okay, thank you to the Prime Minister. We'll stay with the other ministers and the doctors for another 20 minutes. Thank you very much. Operator.
Thank you. Merci. The next question will be from Marika Walsh from the Globe and Mail. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Good afternoon. I wanted to revisit the question that Jordan Press first asked the Prime Minister. The message from the U.S. Administration to Americans, where they have a lower vaccination level, much lower, is don't panic and enjoy the holidays if you're fully vaccinated. And I'm wondering what you expect Canadians to make of the fact that your message almost seems to be borderline to be at least very worried, if not panic. You're telling people to reduce contacts to immediate family and friends only. You're urging people to cancel their holiday plans. I'm wondering how you explain that difference to Canadians who consume so much U.S. news.
I will take a stab at that question to begin with, and then perhaps Jean-Yves will want to elaborate. Look, Canada is not the United States. And I think all of us know that very profoundly. And our countries have taken very different approaches in the fight against COVID. I know that this is a really hard time for everyone in Canada, but I think also we should take some comfort and draw confidence from the fact that when you compare how Canada has done to the way that other similar peer countries have handled the fight against COVID, Canada has done pretty well. We have the second lowest mortality rate in the G7. That's really meaningful. We, by sticking together, by supporting each other, by being resilient, we have managed to save a lot of lives, and we've kept our economy really intact as well. Now, the one thing I do want to sort of strongly push back against is this notion that the federal government, and I would also say the provincial governments too, that any of us are in any way offering a counsel of panic or a counsel of despair. That is totally not the case. Quite the contrary. I think Canadians should be reassured by the fact that we are ready for this as a country. We have the economic support measures in place, and actually we thought about it beforehand, and already in October we put in place laws with flexibility that are allowing us to respond really quickly to this situation. We have been ordering boosters, rapid tests, and therapeutics for precisely this situation. In the fall economic update, we provisioned the money to pay for all of these supports. And as Jean-Yves has been quite rightly emphasizing, as a country, we've done really well, not just on buying vaccines, but on all of us getting vaccinated. And as you see from the experience of many countries, that is not so easy to do. So I think as Canadians, we should really feel reassured by our demonstrated national capacity to handle COVID, by our demonstrated national resilience, by the fact that we have the tools, both economic and the health tools, to handle this, by the fact that provinces and territories and the federal government are working very closely together on this. I know Jean-Yves is in constant touch with his provincial and territorial colleagues. I am working closely with finance ministers across the country. So, the message that we want to share with Canadians is, yeah, this is really, really hard. And it's coming at a time when we're all tired and when we were looking forward to really kicking back and relaxing. But we have done really well as a country so far. We are resilient. We're a careful country, and I think that's a really good thing. And I think all of us need to be careful. I think we all know that. And I'm confident that we will be. And I am really confident that we're resilient and we'll get through this. And I think that is the message from the Government of Canada, from all levels of Canadian government leaders to Canadians. And I have to say, in my own neighborhood, that's exactly how I see people behaving. Responsibly, carefully, in a really intelligent way, thoughtful about their own health, the health of their friends and family and their community. Jean-Yves, peut-être tu veux ajouter quelque chose.
Jean-Yves, perhaps you would like to add something.
Well, very quickly. Indeed, we have been relatively successful. It's never perfect in any particular country, but if we compare ourselves to many other countries, as Minister Freeland said, we have been very successful on all sorts of fronts, including, as she mentioned, our ability to protect the health and safety of Canadians. She mentioned that we have had a lower death rate than other countries. In the United States, their death rate is 3 times of what we have seen in Canada. That means that had we had the same death rate as we have seen in the United States, we would have had 60,000 more people dying of COVID-19 in Canada.
Thanks for that answer. I just want to follow up on that because it seems the message from the U.S., I just to challenge the Deputy Prime Minister, is not to panic and to enjoy your holidays. The message from Canada is clearly not that. And at the same time, the message from the U.S. is they are doing everything possible to avoid lockdown. your message today is on how the government is preparing for lockdowns and restrictions. And going to the government's responsibilities federally, I understand that provincially it's where the healthcare rollout is possible, but as the government watched the provinces sit on rapid tests for the last almost 2 years, why didn't the federal government take initiative and, for example, ship out tests directly to Canadians through the CRA or Post Canada or Elections Canada?
So, Marika, let me take on that question. And again, I'm just going to start by saying Canada is not the United States. I think we are all very, very aware of that. I think we are aware of and proud of the sovereign choices our country makes. And our country makes very different choices from the U.S., from many other countries on a lot of different issues. I do really want to emphasize, because you used the word panic, I want to emphasize to Canadians that is in no way the attitude our government is taking. In the many conversations I have with provinces and territories and municipalities, that is in no way their attitude either. But we are taking an approach which is careful, which is prudent, which is focused on following the science, which is focused on saving lives. From the economic perspective, as finance minister, let me tell you that we have understood from the beginning of this pandemic that the strongest economic policy was a strong healthcare policy, and we are continuing to take that approach. We very much understand and respect the responsibility that provinces and territories have for healthcare and for making decisions about public health, and also at the decisions that public health officers make at even more local levels. They are there, they are on the ground. We do, however, at the federal level, know how hard it is to make those decisions, how hard it is for provinces and territories and municipalities to choose to restrict what businesses can do, what people can do. And so our support measures announced today are there to help public health officials at the provincial level, at municipal levels, to make the right decision to preserve the health of Canadians. And I'm very glad that we have put in place for ourselves the legislative tools to offer that support, that we have the balance sheet to offer that support, that we have thoughtfully and carefully provisioned in the fall economic update to offer that support. That is the Canadian way. We believe in resilience. We believe in supporting each other. And that's what we've done since the beginning of COVID. That's going to be what we continue to do. Jean-Yves, est-ce que tu veux ajouter quelque chose?
Jean-Yves, would you like to add anything?
No, I think you said it really well, Christine.
Merci. The next question is from Rafi Boudjikanian from CBC News. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Thank you. This is for the health minister. We're seeing the province of Nova Scotia pretty much abandon using the federal COVID app, saying the uptake was very low, so they're relying on people who test positive to contact their own close contacts. In the whole country, we've seen more than 1.9 million infections. You've only got about 37,000 uses of the app. What would you say now to Canadians who are wondering what is the best way to contact trace for COVID, and what improvements would you seek to make to the app, if any?
Well, thank you for the question. I would point out first that all of these tools are complementary. They are never identical. They work in different manners, and all of them end up very useful as a set of tools. So the app is not obviously the only way by which people can both monitor and follow up on their contacts. That's obviously a key thing to do right now, given the large size of transmissibility of the new variant, the variant being very transmissible, the importance of following up on contacts, either through the app or through other measures, is extremely is paramount. So it's all about reducing contacts, protecting ourselves when we do have contacts, and if we get infected, making sure we share that information with others using the app or other tools. Now, this being said, as we also alluded to earlier, there are challenges in provinces and territories doing all of that work in a manner in the size with which Omicron is spreading across Canada, and the federal government is there to help and is going to continue to be there to help through procuring and distributing tools and resources such as the app and personal protective equipment and tests, rapid tests included, vaccines, boosters, and all sorts of other things, understanding again that this is complementary to other tools that provinces and territories will also want to use.
Thanks. And my follow-up question is to Minister Freeland. You announced the one-time payment for seniors who've had their guaranteed income supplements clawed back because they took pandemic support. Critics are worried this money won't show up until May, that the payments will come is not only causing anxiety for seniors, but it's also resulting in some of them making some pretty hard choices, living in their cars or choosing to buy food over needed medication. Can you clarify when the one-time payments will start rolling out for seniors?
Thank you for the question. I am very conscious and very concerned about the difficulties that seniors who are eligible for the GIS but also got support from the CERB are facing. And it is precisely because our government shares the listening to those seniors that I made the announcement last week in the economic update that we would be making payments to those seniors to compensate them for that GIS which they lost. It is technically something quite challenging to do, just given the different payment systems the federal government has. I would like to assure seniors, though, that we're aware of their needs. Seniors who qualify for the GIS are among the most vulnerable people in Canada. And we are working really, really hard to get this done as soon as possible.
Thank you. La prochaine question est de Mylène Crève, La Presse.
Next question from La Presse.
Oui, bonjour. Concernant l'aide des Forces armées canadiennes, je me demandais combien de provinces cette semaine ont officiellement demandé cette aide. Et est-ce que les Forces armées canadiennes ont vraiment suffisamment de capacité de ressources humaines pour aider à la vaccination?
To assist in vaccination?
Merci beaucoup pour la question.
Thank you very much for the question.
D'abord, au sujet des provinces et des territoires,
now, regarding provinces and territories, my team and myself, also Minister Blair, of course, and Minister Anand, are all in communication with the provinces and territories. I mentioned my conversation with Mr. Dubé yesterday.
Veulent nous faire part. Et là, donc, rapidement, si je passe à la question qui est complémentaire sur les forces armées canadiennes. Les forces armées canadiennes ont des capacités limités beaucoup des capacités des forces armées canadiennes sont déjà déployées dans les communautés autochtones, dans les territoires
being used, have already been deployed in indigenous and remote communities. But even if that were not the case, the magnitude of our country and the magnitude of the demand means that we are not necessarily able to use the Canadian Armed Forces, the medical resources, as much as is being asked. That is why we are working with the Canadian Red Cross also.
De quelle manière notre financement qui a été accordé il y a déjà un peu de temps peut être utile pour appuyer le Québec et d'autres provinces.
Which will also be helping Quebec, other provinces and territories.
Je sais que des conversations semblables
ont eu lieu entre le ministre
Guilbeault
we discussed this, and I know that my colleague Minister Blair has also had similar conversations to see what the best approach is to tackle the complex vaccination situation, including in Quebec. So non-medical related resources can also be deployed for the provinces. Follow-up question. The second question is for federal public health. What explains the difference in the number of cases in Quebec, which is a very high number, and Ontario, which has a higher population, but where the number of cases is lower than in Quebec?
Dr. Yu?
Oh, OK, c'est pour moi.
Oh,
OK, merci pour la question. Je pense que M. Duclos va commencer. Non. Ce qu'on voit actuellement à travers le pays, c'est qu'on a la transmission communautaire partout. Et aussi, on voit aussi avec les provinces et territoires, et ici on parle du Québec, aussi l'Ontario, qu'ils sont près de la limite pour la capacité pour vraiment dépister. Donc, on sait que les nombres de cas comme signalés officiellement, c'est sûrement, presque sûrement une sous-estimée de la vraie situation. Donc, je pense que oui, on continue au fur et à mesure pour l'instant pour ramasser les données probantes, les cas signalés de Québec et de l'Ontario, mais je pense qu'en fin de compte, c'est partout dans les deux provinces et c'est pas vraiment une question de comparer les chiffres exacts parce qu'on sait c'est sous-estimé dans les deux provinces aussi partout au Canada. Je pense que ce qui est important maintenant, on commence une discussion avec les provinces et territoires de regarder exactement qu'est-ce qui se passe dans les hôpitaux parce que c'est vraiment, je pense, au fin de compte, plus important de regarder c'est quoi l'impact sur le système de soins de santé parce qu'on ne sait pas encore la question est-ce que l'Omicron est plus ou moins important pour les conséquences graves pour les personnes contaminées, mais c'est une question, un enjeu actuel. On discute avec les provinces et territoires. On continue avec le travail avec les provinces et territoires, mais je pense que c'est plus un cas de vraiment viser sur le nombre de cas signalés dans la communauté, mais peut-être que plus une question importante pour regarder ce qui se passe dans les hôpitaux. Merci.
Communities, and we are also looking at the situations in hospitals.
We'll have time for one more question, please, operator.
Yes, merci. Thank you. The next question will be from Stephanie Levitz from the Toronto Star. Please go ahead. Your line is open.
Thank you. My question is for Minister Freeland. It relates to the expansion of the benefits. As we've all alluded to over the course of this press conference, the testing system in this country has more or less collapsed. And in many places, people are being told that they need to stay home and isolate for 10 days, as does their entire household if anybody has symptoms, because there's no capacity for PCR testing. So this is effectively a lockdown. But the Canada Worker Benefit, of course, even with your expansion today, only applies in like this very specific capacity restrictive instance. So I'm wondering for all of these people who are being told, please isolate, please limit your contacts, they can't go to work. They can't get a paycheck. So what is the government going to do for them? Are you looking at all at expanding this benefit program any further?
Thanks for the question, Stephanie. And let me just remind you, as Carla pointed out in her remarks, that the caregiver and the sickness benefit remain in place. We extended the number of weeks you can claim for those benefits. Each of those benefits is at $500 a week, and that was also part of Bill C-2. And I'll also point to the fact that we have passed 10 days of federal sick leave. So for people specifically who need to stay home to take care of someone who is sick or needs to self-isolate, or who themselves are sick or need to self-isolate, those benefits at $500 a week continue to be in place as they were in sort of the darkest early days of the pandemic. And then I would sort of more broadly say, we recognize that the restrictions that many provinces and territories have put in place are very significant. And that is really at the heart of today's announcement. We use the regulatory flexibility that we built in to C2 to give us the ability to provide wage subsidy, rent subsidy, and income support to people even absent a full formal lockdown. That's the heart of what we're saying today. But I will maybe pass it over to Carla to see if she wants to say anything more, perhaps about the sickness and caregiver benefits.
Oh, well, thank you, Christia. Yeah, just to emphasize, Stephanie, how important it is to have the caregiver and sickness benefits available to Canadian workers. So the caregiver benefit is available for 44 weeks now, and the sickness benefit for 8. If your child is not able to go to school for reasons related to COVID, you can take time off work and get this benefit at $500. If you have to self-isolate, if you're sent home from work to self-isolate, you have access to the sickness benefit. So the lockdown benefit is additional to these two kind of foundational pieces related to public health and sickness and COVID itself. The lockdown benefit is for people who have experienced job loss or reduced hours as a result of public health lockdown orders, which come in a variety of shapes and sizes, as we've seen, including reduced capacity orders, which we're adding to the list of orders today, or are being added, that qualify people for the lockdown benefit. So it's an addition to these other ongoing benefits that we have.
Okay, thank you for that. And just as my follow-up, I guess it's back to you, Minister Freeland. You earlier used, you were talking about the distinction between Canada and the U.S., and you said that we have demonstrated national capacity to deal with this. But have we, though? Because if we had the capacity to deal with this, then we wouldn't have PCR testing backlogs, meaning people have to isolate for days on end. We wouldn't be slashing business capacities to avoid overrunning our hospitals. And we wouldn't be worried about overrunning our hospitals if we had demonstrated national capacity. So I'm wondering, why it is you think we are somehow better prepared or have the capacity in place to weather this when many people don't feel like that's their lived reality right now?
Well, look, it's a really good question, Stephanie, and I do not want in any way to minimize how hard things are right now, nor to minimize the fact that we are in for some even tougher times ahead. And that is true. And that is really hard. And I was going to say it's frustrating, but that is probably too mild an adjective. These are some very difficult times, and there are almost certainly even more difficult times ahead. But I do think that it is also really, really important for Canadians to be reassured by the progress that we have made in the 21 months we've been fighting COVID, and to be reassured by the fact that we have a lot of tools and a lot of knowledge that we didn't have when this pandemic first hit. We have a very high national level of vaccination. That is a really good thing, and that is going to stand us in very good stead as we face Omicron. We have plentiful vaccines and boosters, and that is really important too. It means that as quickly as we are able to get the healthcare professionals out there to vaccinate us, we can add that additional level of protection. We have a lot of rapid tests in the country, and we've ordered a lot more. in the fall economic update, just last Tuesday, I announced an additional 180 million rapid tests that we are acquiring for 1.7 billion. And that was before, this really harsh reality of Omicron had hit. We announced that. And you know what? We have bought those two, as Jean-Yves has just reminded us. $2 billion to procure 1.5 million courses of treatment, with another 500,000 available if we want to buy them. So these are all really, really important healthcare tools that we have. We have the reality of a high level of vaccination. And I believe that we have public health authorities and provincial and territorial and a federal government that know how to work together and are able to support each other and support Canadians and Canadian communities in doing the right thing when it comes to fighting Omicron. And that is what the federal government is announcing today, that we are putting in further economic support measures to help us all get through these additional public health restrictions that are being put in place. That is an example of collaboration, and it's also an example of foresight and of thinking ahead. The fact that we had these tools already in our toolbox and are able to deploy them. So, look, I would never want to minimize the scale of the challenge we all face. It's a really big challenge, and Dr. Tam has quite rightly highlighted how hard it is, in particular for all of our healthcare workers who are working so hard, are no doubt so tired going into this. And I am grateful to them for the work they've done, and I'm grateful to them in advance. But even as we have our eyes wide open and are realistic about the challenge ahead, I do think it's really, really important also for us collectively to have the confidence and the strength that comes from knowing we can do this. We have the tools to do this. We have the individual character, and the collective resilience and intelligence and, community spirit, national spirit that it's going to take to get through this. And I think it is really important for the federal government to say to Canadians that that is the case, because it is.
And I would very quickly add to that, we heard about panic earlier. This is not panic, this is prudence. Prudence from a health perspective, prudence from an economic perspective. It's also building, I think, public confidence, which has been very strong in Canada, confidence in our institutions and confidence in each other. Unlike, I think, in some other countries, we have shown how close to each other we can be, supporting each other in the context of our federation, using a portfolio of tools, which to be perhaps too, not modest enough, is exceptional, internationally speaking. So again, prudence, partnership, a portfolio approach to what we do. And I think this is what we need to continue to do as we move, I think, with more success than other countries through this next challenge.
Okay, that concludes today's press conference. Thank you, ministers. Thank you, doctors. Merry Christmas.
And good evening tonight from Washington, and we are here in the nation's capital tonight for our exclusive interview with President Biden at a critical time in our country. The Omicron variant, now the dominant strain, we learned today now in all 50 states. And with this new COVID surge, just as Americans gather for the holidays, the long lines across this country, Americans trying to get tested. We ask, nearly 2 years into this pandemic, why is it so difficult to find a test? We sat down with the president right after the FDA authorized that breakthrough new treatment today, the first COVID pill in the U.S., Pfizer's antiviral pill. We asked the president how much has the government purchased and how soon before those pills reach the Americans who need them. And with those long lines for COVID tests across the country, we asked, could more have been done to prepare for this new variant? And where do we go from here? And will his own family get rapid tests before they gather for Christmas? Tonight, the president also on the economy, the prices Americans are paying. The White House today noting the success of getting ports moving again, progress after the supply chain shortage, saying gifts made it in time for Christmas. And we asked the president about Senator Joe Manchin and whether the president's Build Back Better bill can be saved. And with the January 6th anniversary approaching after the attack on the Capitol, what the president said today about accountability. And we asked, does the president plan to run for re-election? Tonight, President Biden, one-on-one with us at the White House. I want to get right to Omicron. As you know now, the dominant strain here in the U.S., Dr. Fauci now says it could account for up to 90% of all new cases by just next week. The CDC now warning Americans that we could see peaks that we haven't seen so far in this pandemic. I know just before we sat down here, the FDA has now authorized the first COVID pill, the first antiviral pill from Pfizer. 89% effective at preventing hospitalizations and death. The obvious question for you, Mr. President, is how much has the government purchased? How much is ready to go right away?
We've purchased several million already, but here's right away, I think don't hold me to the number, I think it may be 20 million, but a lot of pills, all they can make so far. But you know, I hope we don't get there, because if people get the shots, they get their 2 shots and a booster, they're not going to be in a position where they're going to need such a pill.
Do you have any idea how quickly the American people will actually see these pills? How soon we're going to be able to get them to hospitals that are already seeing patients?
The answer is, I think it'll be a matter of weeks to a month to get the pills, but it won't be enough to get to all the hospitals. We ordered a lot more of those pills. We now have to order millions of those pills.
We learned just before we sat down together here that Omicron has now been detected in all 50 states. And you told the American people just yesterday that we are prepared for what's coming. But 3 days before Christmas, if you look out across the country, you see it everywhere, these long lines, people waiting for hours outside in the cold just to get tested, to be reassured before they spend time with their family. I saw it in Washington today coming to the White House. If you go to the pharmacy, we hear this over and over again, empty shelves, no test kits. Is that a failure?
No, I don't think it's a failure. I think it's, you could argue that we should have known a year ago, 6 months ago, 2 months ago, a month ago. I've ordered 500 million of the pills, 500 million pills. 500 million test kits that are going to be available to be sent to every home in America if anybody wants them. But the answer is, yeah, I wish I had thought about ordering 500 million pills 2 months ago before COVID hit here.
But we're nearly 2 years into this pandemic. You're a year into the presidency. Empty shelves and no test kits in some places, 3 days before Christmas when it's so important. Is that good enough?
No, nothing's been good enough. But look where we are. When last Christmas we're in a situation where we had significantly fewer people vaccinated. Emergency rooms were filled. You had serious backups in hospitals that were causing great difficulties. We're in a situation now where we have 200 million people fully vaccinated. 200 million people fully vaccinated. And we have more than that who have had at least one shot. And they're getting these booster shots as well. So we've moved along, and the CDC is still saying, and the docs who advised me on this are still saying, if you are tested, if you know where you are in terms of having gotten the shots, there's no reason why you can't get together with your family and your friends. We couldn't do that last Christmas.
Let me ask you about what Dr. Fauci said. I think it was a week ago today about the so-called neutralizing antibodies. He said after 2 shots, it did wane over some period of time, and that it was only after the booster that you got back into that protective zone. So are you talking about gatherings with people who have both vaccinations, both shots, and the booster?
That's the safest thing you can do, both shots and the booster.
Let me ask you about what you said on July 4th. I know you remember it well. You told the American people we're closer than ever to our independence from a deadly virus. Do you think you overpromised?
No, we were closer than ever. But there's a lot we don't know. It's like, I'm sure you're going to ask me, when's this going to end? How are we going to do this? Are we certainly going to be able to overcome the Delta virus, the virus, COVID-19? The answer is, the expectation is yes, because we have the best scientists in the world. We're moved so rapidly compared to other countries. But we don't know. We don't know for certain. So that's
what would you say to some Americans who might say this feels like we're chasing Omicron instead of being ahead of it, fully prepared for it?
Well, look, Omicron only really came on the scene just before Thanksgiving. We weren't talking about Omicron 6 months ago, but it's just recent. And so we are chasing Omicron. But the fact of the matter is, you're chasing whatever comes on the scene that wasn't there before. And this wasn't there this last summer, for example.
The vice president said in recent days that you didn't see Delta coming, you didn't see Omicron coming. How did you get it wrong?
How did we get it wrong? Nobody saw it coming. Nobody in the whole world. Who saw it coming?
I guess what I'm asking is, scientists have long said that when you're dealing with the coronavirus, COVID-19, that there are going to be mutations, that most likely over time it is going to become very transmissible because this virus is trying to stay alive, trying to survive. So did the administration not expect that there could be moments like this one where you'd have a highly transmissible variant that's possible around the corner?
It was possible. And it's possible there could be other variants that come along. That's possible. But what do you plan for? You plan for what you think is available, that is the most likely threat that exists at the time, and you respond to it. And I think that that's exactly what we've done. And that's, for example, Omicron is spreading rapidly. But the death rates are much, much lower than they were. This is not March of 2020. This is a very different time than we're in now.
I know you're going to get together with the children and the grandchildren for the holiday. How will that work? Will you all rapid test before you're together?
Yes. I'm doing it almost every day.
And is your hope that for the millions of Americans who are trying to get tests before the holiday, that they'll be able to do?
Well, they won't be able to do it. The number of tests available, I've ordered 500 million for the United States to be sent to everybody who wants to test can have one sent to home.
And that's January.
That's in January.
And so will they have those rapid tests by when? By mid-January, by the end of January?
The expectation is that the rapid tests will start going out
Mr. President, let me ask you about just getting on a plane in this country. We're seeing millions travel home for the holidays, filling the airports and getting on these planes. Have you considered requiring passengers in this country to be vaccinated to get on flights?
It's been considered, but the recommendation I've gotten is not necessary.
Even with Omicron?
Even with Omicron. That's the recommendation I got so far from the team.
Let me turn, Mr. President, to Build Back Better. Many say it's an agenda in peril right now, in large part because of Senator Joe Manchin. Universal pre-K, the child tax credit, of course, historic money to fight climate change, in the words of your administration. You've met with Senator Joe Manchin a number of times. You invited him to your home in Delaware. He came to the White House a week ago. Then he's on Sunday morning cable and says, I'm a no.
Well, look,
how does that happen? How are you not able to close the deal?
Well, look, let's talk about what we have done. We have passed more major legislation than anybody in their first year ever. And I haven't given up on this. I haven't given up on it.
But Senator Manchin's main sticking point, it would appear, is the child tax credit. Are you willing to take that out if it means bringing him on board?
Well, look, I want to get as much as I can possibly get done. As much as we can possibly get done. I still think we'll be able to get a significant amount of what we need to get done, particularly as the American people figure out what is in this legislation. It's a
And as Americans gather this Christmas, we talked about the cost. Inflation at a 40-year high in the U.S.
Unemployment has come down. Gas prices have come down 10, 11 cents or so since
because I made sure they
tapped into the strategic reserve. I know that. But American families are feeling this.
They are.
And we have to acknowledge that. Inflation of 40-year high. The Fed just indicated that they might have to raise interest rates up to 3 times in the coming year just to slow things down. That sounds like Americans should be prepared for potentially more pain before this gets better.
If we don't pass Build Back Better, I think they're right. But if we do, 17 Nobel laureates in the economy said it's going to bring down inflation if we pass what I'm talking about.
As we prepare to mark the new year, we also know that means January 6th is coming, 1 year since the attack on the Capitol. I sat down recently with 3 of the officers who testified before the American people about being attacked that day, the one officer trapped in that doorway. And all 3 of them kept coming back to one word in this interview. They kept saying accountability. And they told me that means if it leads right to the very top, we want accountability. Do you agree with those officers?
I think accountability is necessary. Look.
And that means if it goes right into the previous administration?
Those responsible should be held accountable.
I want to ask you about something I asked weeks before the election when we sat down. You said you would absolutely serve 8 years if elected. Do you plan to run for re-election?
Yes. But look, I'm a great respecter of fate. Fate has intervened in my life many, many times. If I'm in the health I'm in now, if I'm in good health, then in fact, I would run again.
And if that means a rematch against Donald Trump?
You're trying to tempt me now. Sure. Why would I not run against Donald Trump or even the nominee? That would increase the prospect of running.
The president at the White House with me this afternoon. Later tonight on Nightline, what the president said about voting rights in this country, what he's willing to do.
Encore une fois, nous devons nous plier à l'agenda sanitaire de messieurs Véran et Castex. Encore une fois, face à ces échecs, le gouvernement revient sur ses promesses. Hier, il nous promettait qu'il n'y aurait jamais de passe sanitaire. Aujourd'hui, il est la condition de notre vie sociale. Hier, le gouvernement nous promettait que 2 doses de vaccin suffiraient. Aujourd'hui, il nous en impose une 3e.
Anthony on Air podcast back for another episode, and we are stoking those conspiracy theory flames with this story that Jeffrey Epstein is still alive. Episodes brought to you by our good pals over at Hero Soap Company. They are the best. Link in the description below. Grab a bar of soap from them. More on them in a second. Frankie C is here with us. You can see him. What's up, Frankie C?
In audio tapes given to the Washington Post by the president's niece, Mary Trump, you hear the president's sister, retired federal judge Mary Ann Trump, lashing out at her brother, calling him cruel, a man with no principles, delivering harsh judgments on his conduct in office.
Tweet and the lying. Oh my God, I'm talking too freely, but you know, the change of stories, the lack of preparation, the lying, the holy.
White House Chief of Staff Mark Meadows joins us now. Thank you for joining us, Mr. Meadows. Have you spoken to the president about those tapes? What's his response?
Well, obviously, he's been public with his response. You know, just another day and another attack that we continue to see, George. I can tell you that I've never met the judge. I was at the funeral the other day. I was hoping to meet her there. She didn't show up for her brother's funeral.
Mr. President.
The pause on student loan repayments for an additional 90 days through May 1st, 2022. This is an issue both President Biden and Vice President Harris care deeply about. Well, the jobs recovery is one of the strongest on record, with nearly 6 million jobs added under President Biden, the fewest Americans filing for unemployment in more than 50 years, and overall unemployment down from 6% to 4.2%. We know some student loan borrowers are still coping with the pandemic and need some time before resuming payments. So this pause gives the administration time to manage the ongoing pandemic and further strengthen our economic recovery. In the meantime, the Department of Education, and they also issued a statement that hopefully you will have seen, will continue working with borrowers to support a smooth transition back into repayment and advance economic stability. I would also note for all those who have student loans out there, the president also renewed his call for all student loan borrowers to do their part as well by taking full advantage of the Department of Education's resources, considering income-based repayment plans or public service loan forgiveness, and getting vaccinated or boosted. I was looking at what Trevor was looking at behind me, but yes, this is another note. Don't worry, I'll get there in just a moment. Also just wanted to note the president, of course, just met with a number of business leaders and industry leaders about efforts to address bottlenecks in the supply chain. I think you all saw him give remarks on that as well. But as the New York Times said today, Christmas gifts are arriving on time this year. Good news, we've saved Christmas. And that is because President Biden recognized this challenge early, acted as an honest broker to bring key stakeholders together, and focused on addressing practical problems across the global supply chain. Here are just a few key points of progress. The number of containers sitting on the docks at the ports of LA and Long Beach for over 8 days have fallen by nearly 50%. The average amount of time containers sit on docks has fallen by a week. The price of shipping a container between Asia and the West Coast has fallen by more than 25% since its peak in September. And as the president also referenced, the stocks on shelves is at about 90%, retail stocks on shelves at about 90% inventory. It was about 91% pre-pandemic, just to give you a sense. So people can go purchase presents even at this point if they haven't done their shopping. And also we announced as a part of the Port Action Plan $230 million in port infrastructure development grants. And then finally, we're up to the graphic. Today we also announced that since November 15th, a record-breaking 13.6 million people have signed up for health insurance during open enrollment, with 4.6 million people gaining health insurance through the Affordable Care Act since the president took office. The rescue plan reduced premiums by an average of $50 per person per month, meaning 80% of consumers can find a plan for $10 or less per month. Okay, last piece I just wanted to give you an update on. Sorry, I guess we're getting a lot of news out before the end of the year. The Department of Treasury also announced today broad authorizations that ensure that NGOs, international organizations, and the U.S. government can continue to provide assistance and support the Afghan people. And we've talked a bit in here before about what additional steps we can take. So these authorizations build on earlier authorizations issued in September. They're consistent with the resolution adopted by the UN Security Council earlier today that established a carve-out for humanitarian assistance in the UN 1988 sanctions regime to ensure urgently needed aid can reach the Afghan people. This resolution was drafted by the United States and unanimously adopted by the 15 members of the UN Security Council. The resolution also requests periodic updates by the UN Emergency Relief Coordinator to ensure assistance is reaching the intended beneficiaries. I would just remind all of you we're the single largest provider of humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan. In addition, we're going to provide the people of Afghanistan 1 million additional COVID-19 vaccine doses through COVAX, bringing our total commitment to 4.3 million doses to date. Hopefully that's enough news for you for the moment. Go ahead.
Thanks, Jen. I have a question on your favorite topic, Joe Manchin. Senator Mitch McConnell and John Cornyn are two Republicans of a few trying to get him to switch parties. What's the White House response to that, and is the president doing any sort of counter effort to keep him in the Democratic Party?
I know Senator Manchin has been asked about this himself and has spoken for himself, as I assume he will continue to do. I would just note that the president considers him a friend. He believes they share values about a range of things personally, but also about why they're in public service, which is to make life easier for working people across the country, to give people more breathing room, to lower costs of childcare, of healthcare, to fight for good-paying union jobs. That's been a common topic of discussion, of course, between the president and Senator Manchin, but I would really point you to Senator Manchin to speak to that.
Sure, and then the Secret Service announced that up to, there's been nearly $100 billion at a minimum stolen from the pandemic relief funds. Can you talk a little bit about how this happened and if, now that the administration sees this problem, if you're ramping up any efforts to crack down on this kind of fraud?
Well, I would note first that we expect them to clarify this was also a concerning headline we saw ourselves, but there is no new research, data, or analysis of fraud here. So just to give you the specifics, what happened is there was just an adding up of 2 old IG reports of well-known challenges at small business loans in states getting out UI payments in 2020. And there's been a lot of reporting, I know, from the Associated Press and others about issues with some of those earlier programs. So it's also important to note that even those 2 older analysis combined payments that include mistakes in over and under payments, but it was a reference to 2 older IG reports.
Okay, and then one more on COVID. The administration is working to gather 4 million doses of COVID-19 treatments by the end of January. Is that accurate? But is that accurate?
You mean 500 antivirus? Which piece are you talking about here?
COVID-19 treatments, monoclonal antibodies.
Yeah, got it. Yes.
So now that the FDA has cleared Pfizer's COVID,
let me give you the exact numbers. So we'll continue your question, and then I'll give you the accurate numbers.
My question is, why is it just 4 million? I mean, is that enough, considering we are now seeing some of these pills get cleared by the FDA? Vaccine hesitation is still a big problem, and we're seeing shortages in monoclonal antibodies nationwide. I mean, why not focus on surging production of these treatments?
Well, I would first say that I know one authorization has happened. We have purchased 10 million Pfizer doses, 3 million Merck, and we'll be prepared to distribute them as another of our treatment options around the country as soon as supply is ready. I think, Doctor, I know there's going to be a COVID briefing later this afternoon, and I know that Dr. Fauci has spoken to this before, and I expect that he will be asked about this again on the difficulty of producing some of these antiviral treatments. And so we, of course, want to ensure that we are bringing to market and making available as many as we can, but that is a reality in the production of these as well. We also want people to be aware of. Go ahead, Phil. Trevor's like, I've asked all my questions. I'm done. Go ahead, Phil.
I beat you, Trevor. That's a big day for me. I'm not trying to be flip with this question, but can you characterize where Build Back Better talks actually are right now? Like, are they back on? What's the process here in the weeks ahead, given some of the optimism we heard from the president last night?
Sure, and I think you heard optimism as well, Phil, from a number of senators who came out of a meeting or discussion of the members of the Democratic caucus last night. And I think what's important to note there is that there is agreement by the vast majority of members that we absolutely need to move forward. And the cost of inaction makes it so that we don't have there's no other option, I should say. And I would say at this point, we expect there to be ongoing and continued conversations at a staff level. Certainly the president will be engaged with members and could be over the coming days. And we are looking forward to moving forward in January, as Leader Schumer has announced.
Have there been any more contacts with Senator Manchin or his office since the president spoke to him on Sunday night?
We have been in touch with his team and his office, and I expect we will continue to be in touch with him as well, but I'm not going to outline all those specifics from here.
And just one more. Obviously, you laid it out, and the president laid it out in his statement, but what led to was there a specific thing that led to the shift on student loans? I think the administration has been pretty clear for several months that February was going to be the end. Was it Omicron? Was it a compilation of factors?
Sure, I think a compilation of factors is certainly accurate, but I think, Phil, as much as we know that there's been a lot of progress in the economy, we know that, as was noted in the president's statement, that a number of people, millions of people across the country, are still struggling with the ongoing threat of the pandemic. Many of them are student loan borrowers. This is something the president's thought a lot about over the last several days in coordination and, of course, conjunction and discussions with the vice president, and it led to the decision to extend till May.
Go ahead. So for the 500 million testing kits that you announced yesterday, when are you expecting that those will be kind of fully dispersed?
Yeah, so let me give you a bit of an update on the process and kind of how it's working. So As you mentioned, 500 million tests bought by the U.S. government will be distributed for free. Right now, the Department of Defense and HHS are executing on what's called an accelerated emergency contract. This means the first delivery from manufacturers will arrive in January, and we anticipate having the full timeline of delivery of all 500 million in the weeks following. So they will start to be delivered in January, and then we will start to make them available, and we will make the website an easy and accessible website available at that time when people will be able to go on and actually request them.
Okay. And do you know when all of them will be kind of out there?
It will be in the weeks following. Obviously, January is when they will start, given thanks to this accelerated emergency contract, but I can't give you an assessment of that at this point in time.
And then are there any plans by the president in any way to commemorate January 6th?
I don't want to speak on behalf of the president quite yet. We're still finalizing plans, but I think it's safe to say that the American people will hear from him on that day. But we'll have more to say, I would expect, as we get closer. Go ahead, Major.
A couple on Joe Manchin. The senator has said that he has been consistent in his objections to Build Back Better. Does the White House agree?
I think in terms of what? Give me more context of what he
He
said.
said he's been consistent about either cost, inflationary concerns, some things being permanent, some things not, some things being 1 year, 2 year, varyings on that. He said he's been consistent on that. I'm just quoting him. Does the White House agree that he has been consistent in his communication with the White House about his concerns?
We believe that the Senator Manchin has been engaging with us over the course of time and months in good faith. I think the statement we put out on Sunday made clear that we didn't feel that his announcement on Sunday was aligned with what he'd committed directly to the president on in terms of the framework of what he might support. So I don't want to characterize further than, the president believes they're friends, they can work together, we need to work together to get this done, they have some disagreements. And that is certainly what our objective is.
One more time. Special thanks to the Louvre Museum, PS5, PlayStation, and Xiaomi for their help for this very, very special event. Encore une fois, un grand merci au Musée du Louvre, à nos partenaires PlayStation, PS5 et Xiaomi. J'invite tout le monde à aller sur davidguetta.com/don si vous pouvez nous aider à aider les autres. Merci beaucoup et encore une fois, bonne année!
according to our doctors, even if you're fully vaccinated, you should wear a mask when indoors and in public settings. Wearing a mask provides extra protection for you and those around you. And I know some Americans are wondering when indoors if you can safely celebrate the holidays with your family and friends. The answer is yes, you can. If you and those you celebrate with are vaccinated, particularly if you've gotten your booster shot. If you are vaccinated and follow the precautions that we all know well, you should feel comfortable celebrating Christmas and the holidays as you planned it. You know, you've done the right thing. You can enjoy the holiday season. And thanks to the progress on vaccinations this fall,
Sébastien, c'est plus long à attacher, c'est compliqué, c'est comme une série de dominos qui tombent, ça. Alors donc, il faudra voir ce qu'on annonce là-dessus, mais ça, on peut être un petit peu optimiste sur la COVID. Est-ce qu'on peut être aussi optimiste sur la capacité du réseau de santé de faire tout ce qu'il a à faire et de délester le moins possible? Ça, c'est un autre.
Puis on devra, Stéphanie, faire le point sur deux éléments importants. Le dépistage, on voit là, que c'est la cohue. Les gens se précipitent, puis il n'y a pas assez de monde, puis on n'est pas en mesure de les accueillir dans des temps normaux. Et la vaccination de la troisième dose, également, on manque de vaccinateurs.
Mm-hmm. Ah. Bien, c'est le même problème partout. On a une pénurie de...
Sense TV, I'm your host, the Doctor of Common Sense. I'd like to ask you a question if you have any liberal friends, or if you happen to be a liberal yourself, or if you happen to be one of those watchers from Facebook or YouTube who tries to view conservatives, what they say, and think you're punching a hole in it.
Because you're making light of...
No, I'm not.
You're making light
I
of
haven't
the
gotten into my points.
enslavement
I'm not
of
making...
people that look like us. You can't make light of that. That ain't nothing you
I
breeze
haven't even
over.
finished this...
you.